Good evening. I want to thank you for tuning in to my little devotional thought this evening. Of course, unfortunately, we're not able to be back in the building. Still got a lot of ice in the parking lot, and we've had the water shut off to the building and the pipes drained in case the power went out to try to prevent the pipes from freezing up. Some logistic stuff. Hopefully, Lord willing, we will be back in there this weekend. As for this evening, how this goes, I've got two different things I want to share with you. First of all, we've been studying in the book of Psalms, and I just wrote an article on Psalm 128. And so we find ourselves this evening at Psalm 129. And I'm going to read that psalm to you and make a couple of thoughts of application, I suppose. The psalm goes like this: Many a time they have afflicted me from my youth. Let Israel now say, Many a time they have afflicted me from my youth, yet they have not prevailed against me. The plowers plowed on my back, they made their furrows long. The Lord is righteous. He has cut in pieces the cords of the wicked. Let all those who hate Zion be put to shame and turned back. Let them be as the grass on the housetops, which withers before it grows up, with which the reaper does not fill his hand, nor he who binds sheaves his arms. Neither let those who pass by them say, The blessing of the Lord be upon you. We bless you in the name of the Lord. So, the writer of this psalm, he's talking about how he's been faced with many trials. Perhaps the nation of Israel in general faced with many trials and enemies. There were times when things looked bad, especially during the captivity, but even Babylon was only going to hold on for so long. Kind of an interesting little verse there in verse 6. It says, Let them be as the grass on the housetops. I did a little investigation on this, which I had an idea of what might be going on with this, but they used mud on the roofs, is my understanding at this time. And so you could see how perhaps a bird could drop some seed, or maybe it was just in the dirt in general, and so some grass might pop up there. But it's not going to last very long because there's not a lot of room for root, and it's going to quickly dry out. And so it's not going to last. And that's kind of the illustration that he's giving about his enemies, that they don't last. They've come up against Israel, but one by one they fall. I think about Sennacherib when he had the city enclosed. He wrote about this, and it's a historical thing. We have found the writings of Sennacherib, which say that, he said that he had Hezekiah caged up like a bird. Of course, Hezekiah prayed to God, and the angel of the Lord came in and struck the army of Sennacherib. Sennacherib went back to his home and was killed in a temple to a false god. It makes me think about Paul's writing in the New Testament, where Paul says, If God is for us, who can be against us? And so that's truly a thought that we can take with us and find comfort in, a reminder throughout the Psalms. And so if you're struggling with something, I would advise you go to God in prayer, do some reading in the Psalms, take a look and think about times in your life when you've overcome trials and afflictions. And so that's our thought from the Psalm this evening, from the Psalms this evening, as far as a devotional thought goes. Of course, if you need help at any time, you can reach out to me or one of the elders, whether it's to talk about something spiritual, or maybe you're in need of obeying the gospel, or you've got something you need to get off your chest. Feel free to reach out to us anytime. You can call us. Our numbers are in the online directory. They're published in the bulletin, I believe, each week, and so we'd be glad to talk to you. As far as our Wednesday night studies goes, we've been looking at life lessons from past mistakes, and we've been in the New Testament. And of course, we just recently started on the book of Mark, but we're soon going to be looking at the book of Luke. And so I wanted to take just a moment this evening to think about the man that bears the name of this book. And we tie this book together with the book of Acts, because if you look at the beginning of these two books, Luke starts out this way: Inasmuch as many have taken in hand to set in order a narrative of those things which have been fulfilled among us, just as those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses and ministers of the word delivered them to us, it seemed good to me also, having had perfect understanding of all things, from the very first to write to you an orderly account, most excellent Theophilus, that you may know the certainty of those things in which you were instructed. And so similarly, you go to the book of Acts, and it starts out, The former account I made, O Theophilus, of all that Jesus began to both do and teach. So he references there a former account. So we put it together that the same character, the same man, wrote these two books. And so we begin to do an investigation of what we know about the man Luke. And he was an evangelist. He was likely a Gentile Christian. We put this together from the book of Colossians because Colossians chapter 4, beginning around verse 10, Paul makes a list of his Jewish co-workers. That's in verses 10 and 11. And then he later mentions Luke, the beloved physician. So the implication here is that Luke was not Jewish. If this is the case, this makes Luke to be the only Gentile author of any New Testament book, as far as we know, of course, the book of Hebrews being a bit of a mystery. So that might be the only opening. But Luke was a Gentile author. He was a physician. Paul explicitly calls him the beloved physician in Colossians chapter 4 in verse 14. The experts say that Luke's writings show unusually precise vocabulary, occasional medical style, especially in the healing accounts. And early Christian writers consistently remembered him as a doctor, those that were writing about things during the first century that were close to the apostles, or maybe close to people who were disciples of the apostles. He was a close companion of the apostle Paul. He's mentioned in at least 3 of Paul's letters. Philemon, verse 24, he's listed as a fellow worker. In 2 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 11, near the end of Paul's life, he says, "Only Luke was with me." And then in Colossians chapter 4 and verse 14, he is mentioned there. And then in the book of Acts. So we look at the book of Acts and we notice that the narrative shifts. There's some sections where it goes back and forth to what person is speaking, such as talking about things as they did this or that, or we did this or that. Acts chapter 16, for instance, beginning in verse 10 and through 17. Chapter 20, verses 5 through 15, 21, 1 through 18, 27, 1 through 28, and verse 16. And so it is believed that we know that he left Paul for a while. And so that's where we started to put it together, that it was Luke that was doing this writing. And if you remember, we go to the beginning of the book of Acts and the book of Luke, and we tie those two books together. It's obvious that he was well educated and he was historically minded. He writes in some of the best Greek in the New Testament, and that's not of my account, but that's what the experts say. Shows careful concern for chronology, geography, political titles, often confirmed by archaeology, especially things that we know about the book of Acts, about eyewitness testimony. And so how do we know he wrote the Gospel of Luke and Acts? Well, it's established by this internal evidence that we've talked about. There's also external evidence, and unanimously in the early church, the testimony was that Luke was the writer of both of those books. So Luke and Acts, written by the same person, it's nearly universally accepted by conservative scholars and even some critical scholars. The reasons being that both books address Theophilus, of course, Luke 1:3 and Acts 1:1. The similar writing style, the vocabulary, the theology, then Acts explicitly referring back to the first person account, and 1:1 and clearly meaning the Gospel of Luke. So the question becomes, who wrote the 2-volume work? And the evidence pointing to Luke, and this man being a traveling companion of Paul. When you compare Paul's known companions with the we sections and remove the Jews, Colossians 4:10 through 11, people who disappear before the book of Acts ends, people Paul mentions separately, Luke fits perfectly into this position as the writer. He had medical and technical vocabulary. Of course, I mentioned that earlier, noticeable in the healings and some descriptions of illness and recovery. It aligns with Luke being a physician. Showed deep concern for Gentiles, women, the poor, Samaritans, the social outcast. This fits also with the Gentile authorship. writing for maybe a broader Greco-Roman audience. The external evidence, of course, as well, the early church fathers recognizing Luke, the Muratorian canon, which came around the late 2nd century, attributes Luke and Acts to the beloved physician. Irenaeus, around AD 180, says that Luke, a follower of Paul, wrote both books. Tertullian, Clement of Alexandria, Origen, Eusebius, all of those guys, early church fathers, contribute both of those books to Luke. Probably writing somewhere around AD 60 to 62. Again, those are, educational guesses. Acts ends with Paul alive under house arrest in Rome, with no mention of his death, Nero's persecution, or the destruction of Jerusalem. So it suggests that Acts was written before those events. Take a look at the book of Luke. Finish up the book of Mark. Take a look at the book of Luke. Go and look at some of those sections that I mentioned in the book of Acts. If you're trapped in for the next few days and you don't have a lot to do, put some work into the Bible study. Thanks again for tuning in. Pray that you have a blessed week. Stay safe. Stay healthy. If you need anything, give me or one of the elders a call.